like to show you how to use HTML5 web workers to spruce up the performance of your page. So basically I have shown a little diagram here so you can see where the HTML5 web workers fit in. So normally we just have like a little page which is being served. And if we want to do some heavy duty processing, what we can do is we can delegate it to a HTML5 worker. And I've shown it as arrows here to indicate that we can send messages from the web page to the worker and then from the worker to the DOM page back. So that's pretty much an overview of the diagram. Let me show you how in code this looks like. So I have constructed a little a web page, and this web page is doing pretty simple thing. It has a stop button where we basically call something to stop the web worker, and there's a hello button which is post a message to the web worker, and then I have a little div where I can show the log output that is coming so we can see what's going on. So if you look at the main app page, uh, on load, I'm just attaching a function here. What this function is doing is it's checking if your web browser supports HTML5 web workers. Then I log a message saying HTML5 workers are supported. The way to start a new web worker is basically through this syntax. What you can say is new worker and give it a worker file or a JavaScript file where you want the web worker to start doing the work. And we also have to add some event listeners. Basically, this event listener message means if we get a message back from the web worker, I call this function called message handler. And if there's an error, it calls this message function called error handler. And this is just the two functions we talked about when we hit the button. If we hit a button, hello button, this will send a message to the web worker, and this is to terminate the web worker, and you terminate the web worker by calling worker.terminate. So here let's go through a little example here. Basically I have a global variable where IDX is set to 1, and this is so that we can see different messages being sent. So here is the function which is going to send a message to the worker. In this, I basically constructed a JavaScript object with two items in here. One is called ID. ID is essentially incremented every time a message is sent to the web worker. And content is always the same. It says here is a message for you. And the way to post a message to the web worker is say worker.post message, and the message will go through. So when the message comes back from the web worker, I have basically these two handlers, message handler that will be called, and then error handler that would be called, and here E is the message. And the way to access the contents of the message is e.data. So all I'm doing is, in this case, my web worker sends me a JSON. So I stringify that and print it to the console. And error handler, if there's an error, I print it to the console. And this log function is just printing the messages onto my div element so we can see what's going on. So if you look at the echo worker or the web work main work, basically I attach an event listener here which says if I get a message, I want to process it in the message handler, and we can go over the function. Message handler is essentially a function where we get a data from our main page. So what I'm doing is this is the e.data ID. This is the message I got from my main page, and this is the content that we had sent. So this is it. So I'm constructing basically a reply back to the page, and I do this by constructing an object, and I post this message back as a reply to the web page. And I also simulate here for 4 seconds that the web worker is doing some work. And basically after work is done, the contents can be sent back. So what I did was I did a little simulation here saying reply.response is delayed. And the response message is basically I call an AJAX function. And I set a timeout so the message can be posted after 4 seconds in this case. So what you see here is going on the call AJAX function. What it is going to do is it is going to use the XHR object, XML HTTP request. One thing to note is you cannot really use the jQuery functions in the web worker because it doesn't have access to the DOM. So it's probably preferable to just use the DOM, just use the normal web functions. So here I'm using an XML HTTP request. Basically, I did a get to a JSON file that I have on my server. and it's basically right now is asynchronous. It's not asynchronous because I don't really need that. I get the response back here, and I return the parse the JSON and send the response back. And the message.json is essentially, it has something called title and excerpt. So let's see this in action. So here I come back to my demo. So it's a post message to the web worker. So you can see the first message came back from the web worker. And after a delayed response, this is the delayed response. And here you can see that there is an embedded, the JSON file data that I had acquired. So this is one it is. And if I can say a post message to the web worker second, then there will be a delayed response. And here you can see that the ID is 2 because every time I do, I send a worker. So if I do a stop worker, which basically will terminate the worker, if I terminate the worker and I say post message to web worker, nothing should happen because the web worker is gone, and that's pretty much it. So if you want to learn more about this and other things, you can go to my web page and basically scroll down to HTML5 and JavaScript, and you can find some additional resources. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this short